and welcome to another session on literary criticism and theory. We continue with literary concepts. We had discussed ambiguity in the last class. Now let's move on to negative capability by John Keats. So objective correlative is done, ambiguity is done, and now we are to start negative capability. But before we move on to negative capability, we have to, or we should be we should have an understanding of Keats. You all are pretty much familiar with Keats and his poems. But Keats as a critic, who is he as a critic? That is something perhaps that most of us or most of you would be wondering. So unlike Coleridge or Shelley, Keats was not a professional critic. He was a poet. Initially he was a student of medicine, but he dropped it and he became a full-time poet. Coleridge, on the other hand, S.T. Coleridge on the other hand, of course William Wordsworth is both a critic and a poet, so we don't have to look at him in detail. But again, Wordsworth wrote his preface to the lyrical ballads only to defend, again, to speak about the new movement that he brought forward. But Coleridge was indeed a critic, and if you look at another thing is, if you look at Shelley, so Coleridge, a critic, his Biographia Literaria, his concepts of fancy and imagination, his concept of the willing suspension of disbelief. Again, I want you to bear this thing in mind, willing suspension of disbelief, because it was Keats who brought forward this negative capability, the idea of negative capability, and after some time, whether he was aware of Keats's negative capability, or if he was aware of the letter that was written by Keats to his brother, we don't know, but still later Coleridge also wrote something similar to it, and that was the willing suspension of disbelief. So negative capability and willing suspension of disbelief of S.T. Coleridge, negative capability by Keats, and willing suspension of disbelief by S.T. Coleridge has similar idea. Okay, but that was written only after, or that was something that came later by Coleridge. In fact, this negative capability, Keats wrote this negative capability because Coleridge spoke about or spoke against half knowledge. Coleridge had spoken about half knowledge and how it was not good, being in half knowledge is not good, and all that, and Keats actually questions this in a letter to his brother. And that is how the term negative capability comes in. But anyways, S.T. Coleridge also later, after few years, he said half knowledge is better, and thus was born this willing suspension of disbelief. Okay, that was a little bit of extra points. Anyway, Shelley, if you look at Shelley, because they were all contemporaries. Coleridge was a senior poet, and Shelley, and also a senior poet to Keats. But Shelley and Keats were of the later romantics. Whereas Wordsworth and Coleridge were the first, and Robert Southey were the first romantics, the first movement of romanticism. They belonged to that first generation, and therefore they were considered as senior poets. So Shelley was a critic by accident. So Shelley wrote a defense of poesy only to defend his poems, or only to defend the attacks on his poems. So Coleridge, if you look at Coleridge, he was a critic as well as a poet, and Shelley, he was a poet and a critic accidentally. Keats was neither a professional critic like Coleridge nor or even Hazlitt, or because Hazlitt, Keats was very much influenced by Hazlitt and his lectures, and it had a profound influence on Keats, Hazlitt's lectures. And in fact, this negative capability and all comes out from after listening to Hazlitt's lectures as well. So it had a profound influence on Keats. So he was, however, not a professional critic like Coleridge or Hazlitt or even Charles Lamb, but nor was he a critic by accident like Shelley. He wrote no theories. But then how then do we have this concept of negative capability? See, Keats, as I told you, regularly visited Hazlitt's lectures. This shaped his ideas on poetry. Hazlitt's lectures inspired him to write letters, and he wrote some of his concepts like this negative capability when he traveled. Now, many of these people, that is the Londoners, these people from Europe, the British people, especially these Londoners, they traveled a great deal from London to the seaside, and Keats also traveled a lot. And during this time, when he was on his travel, when he traveled, he used to write letters to his siblings and also to his friends. And thus he wrote, in these letters he expressed some of his thoughts and also some of his critical ideas, such as negative capability and also egoistical sublime, in letters that he wrote to his siblings, to his brothers and sisters, to his brothers and his sister and also his friends. Now, what is this negative capability? First of all, let's get to understand what negative capability is. This was written in a December 1817 letter to his brother, and in the letter he speaks, or he says that negative capability is when a man is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries and doubts without any irritable reaching out of fact or reason. Now that is important. Without any reaching out of fact or reason. So this means that the author should have the negative capability to be in mysteries, to be in doubts. He should not be able to solve many of the problems himself. He himself shouldn't know answers to some of the problems that arises in his stories. He shouldn't know how to resolve problems raised in his own writings. This is important because the poet will therefore do not dominate, or he will not dominate over the text. The text will have an independent life of its own. If the poet dominates over the text and tries to give answers to all the problems that arises, then it is not an example to negative capability. It is an example to egoistical sublime, which Wordsworth possessed. So egoistical sublime, the writer is in a subjective mood, and in egoistical sublime the writer gives you solutions to all the problems, whereas a negative capability is when the writer gives you problems, introduces the characters, introduces the incidents, gives you the plot and the events that follows and leaves you at that. He does not go to solve those problems. Shakespeare was one, according to Keats, who possessed this negative capability. Now, why is it that Hamlet refuses to take revenge on Claudius? Shakespeare does not give us the answer. Shakespeare does not say that it is because he was suffering from Oedipus complex. Shakespeare does not say that it is something to do with Hamlet's character from birth itself, his nature of procrastinating. It is the critics who said all these things. He just leaves it at that. He refuses to give you the reason as to why Hamlet does not take revenge or keeps procrastinating till the end and brings on a big tragedy. Keats used this to describe the quality of selfless receptivity necessary to a true poet. Now, what is the selfless receptivity? I'm going a little further. I'm going to explain, try to break it down so that you will understand the concept. Now, for example, if I am a poet, if I'm a true poet, I must have this selfless receptivity. So what is this selfless receptivity? For this, I have to take you a little again to the letter that Keats wrote, so that you can understand. So in the letter he wrote to his brother, he was criticizing Coleridge, and he criticizes Coleridge for being happy or content, for not being happy or content with half knowledge. Coleridge was not content with half knowledge. Coleridge wanted to get to know everything in depth. He was going after logic in the initial stages. Or he was not happy with of not completely understanding or resolving problems. Why the problems were not resolved. And that is what Keats is criticizing. So he says that Shakespeare, on the other hand, he takes us to a world of imagination. He breaks all logic. Now in Macbeth, if you look at Macbeth, from nowhere you have witches. The witches come, the witches dance, the witches speak to Macbeth, and Macbeth alone is able to see the witches. Macbeth and Banquo, of course, in the beginning. Later, when Macbeth becomes this monstrous beast, why does he kill Duncan? We don't go beyond we don't ask questions. We readers just leave it at that. കഥയിൽ വേറെ ചോദ്യമില്ല, അതാണ് മനസ്സിലായത്. So we don't ask questions. We don't get to, why did he kill Duncan? We don't get to answer, or we don't answer all those. These questions are not answered. Then next, why does he kill Macduff? Why does he kill Macduff's family? Why does he kill Duncan? How come he sees Banquo? And how come he sees the ghost of Banquo? And all that. All those questions. All right? The readers don't go after those facts. So, likewise, if, you cannot see Shakespeare or the dominant voice of Shakespeare anywhere in Macbeth. You will not find it in Hamlet. You will not find it in Othello. You will not find it in King Lear. It keeps changing. You will not find Shakespeare anywhere. So the author is actually dead. The author is not giving you answers also. He is not solving the problem. He just leaves it and gives it to the audience, and the audience accepts these things as they are without questioning. Okay, so as I told you later, Coleridge also accepted it, and he spoke about the willing suspension of disbelief, which is quite similar to negative capability. So coming back to the point, so if a poet, or if as a poet or a writer I am writing something, then I do not have to go behind irritable facts or reason. If I am a poet and a writer and I am writing something, then I don't have to go for irritable searching after fact or reason. So art, if you look at art is not to do with your brain, art is to do with your blood, your emotions, all right, your imagination. It is not to do with the fact. That's why we often say, when you are from the science background or from the commerce background and not from the humanities background, when you come to study English literature, there are certain times where you would ask, why miss, why does this happen? How come? There was a few students who asked when I taught to a skylark, and I told them the skylark is not just a skylark, but also the thought that Shelley presents to us. It is a metaphor, it stands as a metaphor for thought itself. Few of them found it very difficult to understand, because they are from the science background, they are from the commerce background, and they were not willingly, or they could not willingly suspend their disbelief. So when you are studying art, you have to think with your heart, with your mind, and not from your brain. It's all to do with imagination, your mind, your blood, and not your brain. Okay, so negative capability can be taken to characterize an impersonal or an objective author. The author is objective, not subjective. He does not force himself into it. Who maintains an aesthetic distance from his characters, from his story, and also from the audience. And it is opposed to a subjective author who personally gets involved with the characters and with the actions, and represents or that is represented in his work, and he tries to give solutions to give reasons as to why this is happening, as to why this happened. He gives reasons, so that becomes very subjective. Whereas in an objective reader, the reader does not give you any instance as to why this is happening. It happens. The witches come from nowhere. It happens. Hamlet procrastinates. Why? Nothing is explained. He keeps procrastinating. He just procrastinates. He doesn't want to kill at that time. He does not want to kill Claudius. He waits and waits and waits and procrastinates and procrastinates. Why is not answered. And it leaves us baffled. Why? We don't know. But anyway, we like the play and we don't question it. So if I try to inject the writer, that is, if the writer tries to inject his or her personal belief, like Wordsworth had done, everywhere you look at it, you will find Wordsworth's personal experiences, personal subjective mood of Wordsworth. He gives it from his perspective. He always speaks from his perspective, his point of view. That is not a negative capability. Instead, it is egoistic sublime. It's called egoistic sublime, where you are very subjective and where the writer injects his or her personal beliefs onto the audience or the reader, and also to gives his or her beliefs to the character. Okay, that's why I said you will not find it in Shakespeare, because Macbeth is different from Othello. Othello is different from Hamlet. Hamlet is different from Lear. Lear is different from Duke Orsino. Orsino is different from Malvolio. Malvolio is different from Antonio. Antonio is different from Viola. Viola is different from Olivia. Yes. Olivia is different from Desdemona. So you will not find any characteristics of Shakespeare or his beliefs anywhere in these characters. He lets his characters loose. He lets the witches, when the witches come, he does not control the witches. The witches, it is as though the witches are given life of its own. Where does the witches come from? It's not answered. They just come from nowhere upon the heath to meet Macbeth. Right? How did they come to know that Macbeth is going to soon become the Lord? Nothing is explained. And also they prophesize Banquo, right? How? Nothing is explained. It just leaves it at that, and the audiences or the readers are also happy at it. They accept it willingly. All right. So as a writer, what I should do, I should keep aloof myself with the character or the world I am presenting. I should not involve myself. My writings, I should be able to give the characters the ability to present themselves. I shouldn't impose or inject my views onto them. All right. And അതായത് എൻ്റെ കഥാപാത്രങ്ങൾക്ക് എൻ്റെ ശബ്ദമല്ല, നേരെ മറിച്ച് അവർക്ക് പൂർണ്ണമായും അവരുടെ ലോകത്തിൽ അവരുടെ ചിന്തകൾക്കും അതേപോലെ തന്നെ it's like a kite, let them fly. The kite, it goes as how the wind would take it. Let the string loose. Instead of holding the string tight, let the string loose. All right. So I must not identify anything. I must not, in fact, object or resist any character from doing something just because I don't like it. Just because I say, okay, in witches, I want the supernatural element to take place. The witches is an epitome of evil. I am very God-fearing. I don't want them to, I don't want Macbeth to fall for it. I'm against it. Or I don't want Macbeth to kill Duncan because I don't want it to happen. No, that's not how it is. You should be able to allow the character to form its own voice and let it perform the way it has to. Now you must be wondering, it comes from the same pen, or it comes from the writer's head. It means that you should be able to possess that particular capability. That what is capability? That ability. You should be able to have that ability to be in uncertainties, in doubts, in mysteries. You should not think, okay, if I write like this, the writers or the readers will, what if the readers ask, how did this come from? How did this happen? No, a writer need not solve any of these problems. A writer can let the problems remain like that, because the audience, when they read it also, they will accept it and they will also leave it at that. Because a human being should always be in uncertainties. A human being should always be in mysteries. Don't try to solve problems. Let it be like that. For example, our Ravana, the myth of Ravana, the 10-headed Ravana. A writer has created it out of his imagination. Now we might wonder, how come a person will have 10 heads? How can that happen? When he gets angry, he has all those 10 heads. How does it come out? Right? But do we argue? Do we say that it's wrong? We take it. We take it because we accept it as a powerful character. So what are we doing here? We are willingly, as S.T. Coleridge says later, as S.T. Coleridge has said, we are willingly suspending our own disbelief. We know it is not true. We know it is not a fact, but still we are ready to disbelieve. We are ready to suspend our disbelief. Okay? We are ready to suspend our disbelief. What is belief? Belief is when you go after fact. Right? When do you disbelieve? When there is no fact. Fact illa ennu parayumboഴാണ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ fact or truth or logic or illa ennu parayumboഴാണ് നമ്മൾ disbelieve ചെയ്യുന്നത്. So what are we doing? We are willingly, purposefully suspending, okay, suppressing, suspending our disbelief. That is, we do not question. We believe, we accept. We don't disbelieve even if it is like a train coming out from nowhere. Hogwarts Express in J.K. Rowling. It comes out from nowhere. We disbelieve. We are willing to suspend our disbelief. Right? So, the moment we establish, now that is a capacity that an author should have. Therefore, we establish a oneness with what? Oneness with imagination. We are not going, imagination is the opposite of reality. It stands opposite to reality, opposite to beliefs, opposite to logic, opposite to truth. So we are becoming in one with what? One with imagination. And therefore we are willingly suspending our disbelief. Alright? Now this is a similar or same concept as negative capability. Keats regarded Shakespeare as the prime example of negative capability, because Shakespeare takes us to a vast world of witches, supernatural forces, and many scenes beyond the real life. But we don't argue. We do not put in our logic into it. We just accept it. And we relish it. We relish the words of the witches, right? What is it? Fair is foul and foul is fair, hovers through the fog and filthy air. All right? So, we in fact relish it as the, just like the author relishes it. The author is happy, he relishes it. He gives the character loose, he let loose the character, and he let loose his imagination, he lets his imagination flow. He does not or he does not allow his logic or his reasoning capacity to stop him. He allows or enables the ability to let loose his imagination. And as an audience, we also relish it. We do not go for the Wordsworthian egoistical sublime, where I impose my belief or I try to give reasons. No, negative capability does not do that. I don't become subjective, I become objective with my characters. J.K. Rowling, how J.K. Rowling has done it in Harry Potter, Jurassic Park, the alien invasions, Bahubali, another example, how he jumps from one mountain to the other. We don't question that, all those things. How he gets onto the fort and all, how he fights In fact, we relish it because it is the creativity of the script writer, his imagination, where the character has been given his he is let loose. The script writer does not think, okay, the audience will find it very stupid, because how can a person jump from one building from the ground to that of a big fort? That is impossible. He doesn't think that way and stop his writing. He let loose his imagination. He doesn't think about it, right? He gives, and also the audience also does not think much about it. Though perhaps the audience would find it amusing, they don't question. They just leave it at that and they relish it. That's one thing. Jurassic Park, another thing. Anaconda. These movies, we don't question these things. No? We know it is not true, but still we don't question them. We in fact relish them. We like them. And that is because we are willingly suspending our disbelief. That is what is happening. We have that negative capability of, believing or relishing it and not going after facts. Okay. So we'll stop here. Thank you, and I hope you understood negative capability and also willing suspension of disbelief. Both are similar topics. One is by John Keats. Keats actually spoke about negative capability, and later, it was actually criticizing Coleridge for his, for being too adamant and going after facts, or going after, where Coleridge was against half knowledge. Keats was saying, or according to Keats, half knowledge is like willingly you are putting things in uncertainties, because half knowledge you don't have to solve problems. You let it let the audience or let the readers solve it, or even the readers will not be will not be solving or trying to break their head. In fact, they'll enjoy it. So the writer does not have to the writer does not have to go after facts or reasons, and he can just leave it at that. Okay. So here what was happening is, this is actually foreshadowing the idea of death of the author. You have studied death of the author, Roland Barthes. So this idea is this concept is foreshadowing this idea. The author should not be the authority in the text. He should stand apart from the text. The author should be impersonal, said T.S. Eliot. And all these are therefore related ideas. So that's it. Thank you and keep safe.